So I'm here in Iceland in the Highlands, and this is really just one of my favorite places to shoot. I've been here a lot of times in the summer, and it's always breathtaking. It's an incredible place. It's just otherworldly. You come to this place, there's just black sand desert, there's volcanic cones, colorful rhyolite rocks and valleys. But I've never been in winter. This is my first time in the winter, and it's just next level. Now being here, getting here is really quite challenging. The roads are completely gone. So we've had to come here and especially modify Jeep with great big tires, which we can drive over the snow, because in a few places the snow is about 2 meters deep. Now I'm in Lamanalaga now at the camp here at the beginning of the trail, and you can see around the huts that the snow it's kind of up to the roof. So yeah, getting in here is a bit challenging. We had to come across a few frozen rivers, so it was fun. It was an adventure, but it's just absolutely worth it because this place it's just breathtaking. Now shooting here, it's just wonderful. You can see behind, you've got this hill here. Now in the summer, that's a rhyolite hill, and it's really multicolored and just a wonderful place to shoot with a telephoto lens. In the winter, it has just a completely different life, but it still works just as well with the telephoto. So we got the telephoto lenses on the cameras, and we were shooting abstracts, just zooming in, focusing on detail. And just as we got here, these clouds came in and gave us this kind of depth and contrast, because giving us the light and shadow. Now, the weather's been absolutely amazing. As you can see, it's really sunny, which isn't what we expected. And coming in, we had an incredibly high wind, so we didn't think that we'd be able to shoot very much. This morning, we were out at Haifoss, and the winds there were so strong that we literally couldn't stand up. And I don't know how much shooting we got done, but it was an interesting experience. But as we've come up here, the wind's just completely dropped, and it's just really pleasant to shoot here now. Now, we've heard that the weather's going to be really bad tomorrow, that it's going to be stormy, and I'm not sure whether we're going to get any shooting done. So today we've just been trying to get as much done as possible, shooting in different locations, getting the drone up, and just really enjoying it, because it's such a fantastic place to be. This is an image I captured with the Mavic 2 Pro drone, and I think it's often in areas like this with mountains that an aerial perspective can really help to give an image more drama and more depth. There's just something about an aerial view, getting up in the air and looking down onto the landscape, that really appeals to me. Now, I think part of that is because I'm drawn to ways of seeing the landscape that are different from the ways that our eyes normally see them, which is why I so often shoot with an ultra-wide angle lens or telephoto with focal lengths. And an aerial perspective is the same. It makes us see the landscape in a different way. Now, composition changes when you use a drone. A lot of the traditional foreground elements that we see in wider angles are lost because you're so far above the ground. And so the focus has to be on things like balance and harmony and arranging all the elements within the frame. From the air, you can see all the way down the valley to these mountains here, which act as a focal point, particularly because they're more brightly lit than the surrounding landscape. The riverbed and the streams, they all work together to create these leading lines that pull your eyes towards the peaks, which are hidden behind the shoulder of the mountains on the left, and you just can't see them when you're on the ground. Now, I love how soft the snow blanket in the mountains makes the landscape feel here. There's an almost monochromatic feel to the image. And this is an image that I shot with a drone from a similar angle on a workshop in the previous summer. And while I really do love the incredible colors of this valley and the rhyolite hills, it's a really busy shot with a lot going on that captures the eye. But in the winter, the covering of the snow creates a minimalism to the frame, removing a lot of the detail and highlighting the soft shape of the hills. It also creates a stark atmosphere and feel to the image, which for me really captures the remoteness and the mood of the place in winter. This image is of the same valley, and it's taken with a telephoto lens from the ground next to the campsite. Now, there's an embankment next to the river that gives a slightly elevated viewpoint to look across the riverbed, and a telephoto lens compresses the ridges and the hills together slightly. Now, in this place, a telephoto works better because the riverbed has got no detail or interest. It's just this big, flat, black expanse. So when you shoot too wide, it just adds too much at the bottom. It doesn't give anything to the frame. And likewise, it puts in too much sky, and that just diminishes the scale of the mountains and makes them feel smaller. But when you use a telephoto lens to bring you close, you can only get a small part of these valley walls in the actual frame, and it can leave the image feeling a little bit unfocused. So to get a little wider and to get more shape in with this peak as the main focus and the slope of the hills from the right and left leading up to that, what I had to do was to shoot the image as a telephoto panorama with 3 overlapping horizontal shots. Now, it's always important to make sure when you shoot panoramas that you have a big overlap so the image is easier to stitch together in post. This panorama letterbox format also supports the horizontal nature of this hills and valley. It allows the different ridges to act almost like chevrons, which gives the image more dynamism and makes it feel less static because your eye kind of tends to follow the lines from the left to the right. And then finally there's the light. Now, I stood here for quite a while as the clouds kept passing in front of the sun, waiting for the floor of the valley to be completely in shadow, and that gave me this black foreground which pulls the eye towards the bright snow of the valley at the back. And then I also underexpose the image to darken the sky further, and that makes this white of the snow pop out. The shadow and the light on the side of the hills also creates a nice contrast, and it softens the brightness of the snow a little bit. And again, it also gives the image more dynamism in what would otherwise feel like quite a static composition. Now, I shot this image also in the summer in similarly cloudy conditions, and I've always loved the reds and ochres of these rhyolite hills. But again, the snow gives the whole image a much softer, more ethereal feel. The reduction of the colours and the whiteness creates a much cleaner, more minimal frame where the folds and lines of the landscape feel even stronger. On our way back from La Manalaga, we passed this canyon at Sigolduglafort. Now, this is a place that can be challenging to reach in the summertime as the track that goes to it is really rough. But in winter with drifting snow, it's the kind of place we could only reach with a super jeep. Now, it's a gorgeous place. It's this long canyon where you've got all these waterfalls that cascade over the edge and down the side of the canyon into the water at the bottom. But when you visit it in winter, it feels really different. First of all, most of the waterfalls are frozen, and while this place always feels like an isolated location with the flat black plains around the canyon, in winter it feels even more stark and barren, with the plain it's just completely covered in snow and continuing flat and unbroken to these distant ridges. Now, I always find composing in this location challenging because if you shoot horizontally, you get all this area over here on the left which doesn't add anything to the frame, but if you shoot it in a portrait format, for me, I feel it loses a lot of context. So the horizontal format, it's the lesser of two evils, with the river making an obvious leading line and the curve of the banks here helping to move the eye through the image. The problem, though, is that the image lacks a focal point. There's nowhere for the eye to go to. The horizon is quite flat, and on this particular evening, we had a nice pink glow, but no real drama in the sky. I also think that in the summer, you've got the added interest of these waterfalls on the right side of the canyon, and the water always has this wonderful blue color that contrasts really nicely with the green vegetation. In winter, the waterfalls are mostly frozen, and the image for me, it doesn't really work because it lacks interest and it feels very static. But having said that, it's just still an incredible place to spend some time. The next day, we had really different conditions. Although it started with some really lovely warm light, it soon clouded over with a thick layer of cloud in the sky. Now, it's always great to have strong directional light and color in the sky, but the reality of Iceland is that it's often more cloudy. Now, I've grown to love shooting in these conditions. Cloudy weather, it creates this fantastic kind of mood. And at this time of year when everything is white, there's a simplicity and a minimalism about the landscape that's missing at other times of the year. Now, this waterfall here at Sigoldufoss, which is just a little way downriver from the canyon we photographed on the previous night, this is a location in the summer, it just doesn't work photographically because the landscape all around the waterfall is just dull black volcanic earth. But in winter, when it's surrounded by snow and ice, the blue of the water really pops out, creating this splash of colour amongst all this white in what would otherwise be a really monochromatic scene. Compositionally, it's a really straightforward scene. There's no foreground because the only access is to shoot it from the high bank opposite. Now, I tried a few telephoto shots to isolate small parts of the waterfall for an abstract image, but for me, it felt like they all lacked a focal point, so I just decided to shoot it wider. The panoramic format came later in post-processing when I cropped the image because there was a lot of featureless water at the bottom and featureless white sky at the top, and I just felt that they detracted from the image, which was really all about the blue and white in the water and the white and ice around the waterfall. I really wanted to blow the water here to smooth out the waterfalls and create these smooth lines at the bottom, so I used a 4-stop neutral density filter to give me a 6-second shutter. Later on that day, with the weather still heavily cloudy, we drove onto the snowy plains around the Hekla volcano. Now, the snow here had completely buried the trails in more than 3 meters of snow, and there was no way we could have got here without the Super Jeep and the driver's expert knowledge to avoid driving over places where the snow might collapse into the streams that were buried underneath the snow. Now, it's a challenging landscape to photograph because I spent a while around here trying to find a focal point and a foreground that would balance with it, just to create some depth within the image. And I found this area with these incredible volcanic rocks, which I just wanted to arrange around with the peak in the background. The textures on the rock were wonderful, so I wanted to be close enough to be able to see that, but I also wanted to include plenty of this foreground here at the bottom because I really like the textures and tones in the black rocks and the white ice. Compositionally, this had to be relatively central, the rock, but I didn't want it to overlap with the mountain at all, and neither could it be too close to the edge of the frame. I really liked the dynamic of the angle and wanted it to contrast with the line of the mountain because I felt that these two elements had a kind of energy and gave each other balance, with the mountain remaining quite central as the focal point for the eye to move towards. Now, I tried shooting this in the landscape format as well, but I felt that this hill on the left and this space on the right really didn't add anything to the image, and in fact it actually detracted from both the mountain and the rock, so I preferred to shoot it with a vertical aspect with more foreground and more sky. And also the dark in the sky and the dark in the foreground work as a kind of natural vignette that contrasts with the bright snow areas in the middle, and our eyes are automatically drawn to that part, that brighter part of the image where the two main focal points are. So that's it for this, the first of my Iceland videos. Now, it was an amazing trip. We were shooting ice caves and frozen waterfalls and glaciers and beaches in the winter, so there's definitely going to be 2 or 3 more videos coming up in the future. And as always, if you've got any questions, just drop me a comment in the comment box below or send me an email and I'll get back to you. Thank you so much for watching, and as ever, take care.